Hi there, it's Polly here. With Mr. Snoots. So, I have a sad addiction to space combat games. I love them, always have. And there's a few about, and sort of the 90s were one of the great heydays of the creation of some of the cooler rule sets. Many of these survive, and many of them survive for the best of all possible reasons. They're great games. The very best of these have continued to be adapted and grow and are still out there as living games. And here's one of my favourites, Starmada. Now, it bills itself as the universal game of starship combat. And it is. It is a miniatures or tabletop game of starship combat. And it's infinitely flexible, which is why it survived and why it's so damn popular. He likes it. This guy likes it. So, Starmada, what it does is it gives you so many choices that you can essentially adapt this to whatever your vision is. In its most simple essence, it is a game where we have a tabletop. That can be a blank tabletop, or it can be a hex map tabletop. So, that's your first choice. Are you wanting to play this, blank with rulers, or you're wanting to play it with hexes? I find hexes very useful myself. Next thing is you can decide upon what sort of movement do you want. They present different movement systems. This is cinematic movement where everything inexplicably flies like airplanes. Star Wars. Oh, pull up. Why? Newton's fairly clear on the fact that you're still going to crash. But, if you want that system, it's in there. They've got another system in there, a bit more complex, which brings in sort of different thrust required to sort of move and so on. And they bring in a vector movement system, which is actually a good, simple one, which I really like for the more scientifically minded, where things actually move like objects actually move in space. So, you have inertia, you drift, and if you want to change that, pivot yourself and, put some thrust to burn yourself in a different way, and your drift will modify depending on how you've used your thrust. You may choose to have fuel a factor or not. Fuel adds a tiny bit of complexity to the game where you're going to have to cross fuel units off as you burn. So do you want that or not? These are decisions you make for yourself or for the setting that you're going to use it for. They have, the same goes with defences and weapons and so on ships. So you can have ships that protect themselves just with armour. It is big, it is butch, it has, dense armour plates. Could be Star Trek Enterprise, where they charge the hull plates. Could be Space Battleship Yamato, where this thing has, a 14-inch armour belt. Made from good old Japanese World War II steel, which actually was crap steel. But what the hell? It could be Star Trek style, where you have shields which absorb damage, or they've also got screens which deflect damage. So they flicker on and off to allow you to observe and fight out, so there's a chance that incoming damage is just simply negated. It just bounces off these screens. Or a combination of those. There's no reason why you couldn't have a ship that's got screens and also has, a really heavy armoured skin. Depends on your vision of what you guys want to play, and also if you're doing something specific to a setting. There are many, many, many things that you can choose, such as, anti-fighter defences, point defence, anti-missile missiles, these sorts of things. There are seeker weapons, which are split into sort of things that essentially you fire and they home on the enemy ship. So these will deliver some sort of warhead, and there are many different ways to design these. There are many, many, many different types of projectile and beam weapons. There are mass drivers and different sorts of things. And what they do is they provide you with a slew of different effects and so on. Again, so you can design stuff that suits your setting. So what you're looking at is how long a range you're giving it, what its rate of fire is, which is going to be how many dice you're rolling to hit and so on, or how often it reloads, and then its effects. It could do all kinds of strange catastrophic effects. It could do internal damage. It could overcharge systems like a particle beam so that it basically makes systems on the enemy ship collapse. They can do dozens of smaller hits, some big hits, a massive slew of different effects that you can choose from to design the kind of weapons that will fit your setting. There are Marines. You can board someone. They could say this can be Star Trek style. You come by and start trying to teleport guys on board, or you can send guys across in breaching pods, or maybe you just go side to side with them. But yeah, attempting to board people with Marines is a thing if you wish it. Fighters are a thing. You can have ships that have fighters in hangars that you can launch. You can also use space on the ship to create better launching systems that can more swiftly deploy fighters. So Battlestar Galactica, into the tubes. You can have different sorts of fighters. So there's a baseline fighter, but you can choose higher performance ones, specific attack ones, heavy fighters that take more damage, hyper-fast interceptors, wild weasels, all sorts of stuff. You can make your mix. Up to you. And that's the strength of these things. Up to you. What are you making? And that is kind of why this has survived. Let us say you wanted to do Babylon 5. You're a huge fan of Babylon 5. There's sort of, if you check the online resources, you will find people have the Babylon 5 ships done. These are the weapons that we think are suitable for the different races. Here's our run on different ships. People use this for Star Trek, for different periods of Star Trek and so on. But here's our run at what a Klingon disruptor is, what a phaser does, what a photon torpedo does, what the Tholian web projectors do. Here's our run at the different ships. Battlestar Galactica. You will find it all. People have done it all, and it'll be up there online. But you can design it yourself as well, because this is your game. You do it for your group. Your ships themselves, each one has a little control page for it, and these are pretty simple. So you can see here's a whole bunch of them, and they've got the firing arcs of the weapons that you've designed on them. So they fire through different hex arcs in different ways, and it will record their range and what effects those weapons have. You've got essentially tracks. If a weapon hits and gets past the defenses, it does damage. You roll on a chart and it tells you what it's going to do. It will cross off a box on the charts for the ship, and it can cross off boxes from engines, and as engines take damage, your ship loses thrust. It can cross off boxes from hull. When hull finally reaches zero, the ship goes kabloom. It can cross off from weapons, and it can cross off from systems. As you cross off weapons, you lose weapons, obviously, and systems are things like scanners and shields and screens and defenses and fighter launch tubes and all these sorts of things. Some of those effects will do extra things. So some stuff, it'll do more internal damage. So it's like, this thing will say if you roll a hull hit with this type of weapon, roll 1d3 other additional hits, or it will also damage systems, or like a particle accelerator. If it hits systems, it will arc over and start damaging more systems. And so these little special things turn up. So it really is quite easy to keep track of the damage. It is quite easy to keep track of the ships themselves. If you played like Starfleet Battles and so on, you find there's 1,000 rules which allow you to find little loopholes. And this is not that game. The tactical end of this is you're usually randomizing. There are many different ways of doing your turn sequence. You can do something where each of you picks ships, and if one of you outnumbers the other, then he gets to keep moving ships after the other guy's moved. Or if you outnumber him by like 2 to 1, well, he moves 1 ship, you move 2. Or you could make a deck of cards that has, like, take one guy and say he's red and the other guy is black, and you each get a card for each ship you've got. You shuffle those and you draw those, so you can randomize that movement. Again, up to you what works for you. I recommend the card system, by the way. That works really well. So you move, you shoot. The effects of damage only come at the end of the turn. So if someone's done a move and has shot you and wiped out all your weapons or whatever, doesn't matter, you can still fire your weapons during that turn. They only count as wiped out at the end of the turn. The exception to that is fighters, because the way the turn system goes is it goes, start a new turn, the fighters move and do their damage, and then you do the ships and everything. So if fighters close in and start, blowing all your aerials out and, flying up your tailpipe, then, that can really wreck your day for fighting other capital ships. And you can put up cat patrols and things to try and chase the little buggers off. So, changing faces so that ships' defences that are wearing down, like, if your starboard shields are going down, all right, well, I'm turning my things to port, you can roll ships over. All of which takes thrust and manoeuvre to do, but that would present the opposite side of the shield. So these sorts of things happen. Figuring out where the other guy is going, and another option people might have is pre-plotting their movement. So you have to sit down and pre-plot your movement, and then everybody moves. These are all different things you can try depending on what works for you. So that's why the rules work. What works for you? If you want a very sort of interactive, frenzied kind of thing, use the card system. Maybe you want the Star Wars style simplified movement, and you don't want to bother with fuel, and you can zip around and pew pew pew. Maybe you want vector movement and fuel, and maybe pre-plotted movement. Maybe you want more of a considered, thoughtful game where you've got to predict where the other guy is going, in which case it's going to be simultaneous movement because you've written down a little code of where each of your guys are going. They've got that all written in here, good. I'm drifting forward 3, turning 1 hex side, and thrusting forward another 2, and then drifting another 2. That's a more pre-planned, preponderous, but possibly realistic way of playing. Or maybe you want to mingle the elements of both. So that's the strength of this game. What do you want your game to be? What's going to feel good for you? But the core mechanics is a very simple thing where you've got these linear boxes that you cross off of your hull, your engines, your weapons and your systems, and a pretty simple damage chart for when you're hit, which ones the damage is directed to. There is a big system in here for designing ships. It is quite complex. There are some systems where it'll just say, you've got a set number of hull boxes, just fill it. These guys, what they've done is they've said there are set ship hull sizes. Pick one, frigate, dreadnought, gunboat, cruiser, whatever. That gives you a set amount of space inside it, and systems take up space. Some things take up a hard amount of space. If you design a weapon of a certain type, it will come out and it will occupy X amount of space. Other things, the space they occupy depend more on the size of the ship. So there's a formula to figure out how much space is taken up by your drives, for instance. If I want a drive that pushes me at this speed and I am a ship of this big, you have to do a little calculation. We're all adults. We've all got access to, calculators on our phones. But it will give you a formula and tell you how much space that's going to take up in the ship. And you can massage the stuff together and try and make your perfect ship design. Either your mighty unbeatable dreadnought, or you might decide, right, what would the Starship Yamato look like under this? All right, well, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 main turrets. They got the turret guns. Oh, it's got the big spinal gun. What's that going to be? Well, that's going to be catastrophic damage. It's going to be area damage. It's going to be like going to leave a linear track, so anything in its path is going to destroy. But it's going to take a few turns to actually activate that thing, etc. So and that's why it's not maybe that wildly useful unless your opponent's, rather stupidly flying in a straight line or they're damaged. So yes, you can create all these sorts of things. I want to do Bab 5. All right, do it. What are those amazing kind of angelfish shapes that the Membara use? Well, what are those ships like? Okay. All right. Yep, they obviously have shields. Off you go. Off you go. Design your thing. Battlestar Galactica, fantastic. You can do it. That's why these have survived, and that's why they're good. How do they compare to other sets of rules out there? Well, full thrust, for instance, is way more simplistic. It's very easy to design ships in full thrust. However, I must say, this tactically gives you a better game. The way things are put together in full thrust, I've noticed there's not much maneuver involved. It's very hard to turn, and there's not much reason to. So you tend to get two bunches of ships head towards each other, fire, and then they realise they've gone past. Oh shit! So they both kind of turn into each other in a vague hope that they'll stay somehow in range. But no, they're moving too fast, and they're off to the edge of the board. One side might decide it took slightly more damage, so they go home, or both sides will laboriously turn around and give it another pass. So it's a bit like watching knights joust, really. Yuck! Oh, no, missed him. Oh, hang on. Oh, I'll get you next time. I'll get you next time. Yeah, I'll get you next time. This, none of that. It does tend to have a lot more maneuver, and because the ships are pretty simply expressed after all of this, you can run more ships on the board more easily, so you get fleet tactics, so you start to get that thing, what if I have some really fast moving ships and I'm going to load them up with seeking munitions. So their job is to basically lunge in, dump a whole lot of homing missiles, and then screech the hell out of range. Well, they've just ruined everyone's day. Now, while everyone's desperately, you've got countermeasures, you can, if you've purchased them, you can drop countermeasures, you can try jamming, you can drop less and done. But while everyone's frenziedly twisting and turning to try and get these things off their tail, that's when my gun guys are actually going to try and move in to pick them off in the chaos. So you've actually got some interesting tactics appearing beyond just basic choices of, am I going to be a fleet that runs off a carrier with a bunch of flighters, or am I going for dreadnoughts today? I think it gives you a better tactical game than, say, full thrust. And I think it gives you a better game in many ways than things like Starfleet battles, which are too complex and have too many rules lawyer loopholes that allow someone that's really good at pissing about with finding an obscure rule, to gain an advantage. This doesn't have that at all. You've discussed what rules you're going to use and what world you're trying to fit it into before you started play. We're using vector movement. We're using the randomized turn sequence, and we're suiting this for we've got we're going to use just the pre-built weapons in the game. They've got pre-built everything in here. So they've said this is, in a default universe, this is what a laser would look like. This is what a mass driver would look like. This is what a heavier mass driver would look like. This is what a point defense laser would look like. This is what essentially a thing firing out, a shotgun of metal shards towards something would look like. This is a nuclear missile. This is a fusion torpedo. They've pre-got that. So you don't have to go to the labour of building everything. So good rules, really good rules. Really like them. And again, this is the most recent iteration. So this is the new version 30.0. So this is the most recent version. If you go to their website, you'll find many previous ones. Differences between this edition and earlier ones. These ones are clearer. They've got there's been some changes in how they manage damage and in a lot of the nomenclature, because the way they had screens and things, named. It got some people mixed up with the effects because, you know, they'd grown up on Star Trek and found that, you know, things had different names. So it is a massaged system that is a bit clearer than the previous editions. The same system has actually been adopted by this company to several other things. So they've actually got like World War II naval rules based on these rules, so that you can design dreadnoughts to your heart's content. They have some rules here for larger scale battles that you'll find on their website, where you're just maneuvering squadrons and whatever. There's also campaign systems that you can get on their website. These were all designed for previous editions of the game, but they work perfectly well with this one because the core hasn't changed. So the campaign rules will work, and they're quite good campaign rules. And those campaign rules, they'll take things from, you know, they're like those cool old computer games you got where you go out and explore and you know, set up colonies and make stuff and then blow up your neighbours. If that's what your games club wants to do, this is definitely a set of rules for you. I love Starship games, and I love making fleets. It's a terrible addiction, purchasing cool starships and doing them. So if you've got like any things that you've got, they'll fit for this. My pride and joy actually over here is I have a considerable fleet of the Stardate 3000 miniatures, which are the kind of the original 1970s Starship range. They used to be advertised. You'd see them in like the really early White Dwarf magazines and Dragon magazines in the back, and they're still sold. Stardate 3000, and they're fantastic. The alien ships in it are great. They actually look kind of these wonderfully bug-eyed ships. I believe they're actually all made from leftover bits. The original masters were made from leftover bits from railway models, but they look fantastic all painted up. Some of the stuff from the Full Thrust range, Ground Zero Games, are great. They've got some great stuff that paints up so well. Nothing is more irritating than the Mighty Dick ships from the Ground Zero Games range. Go and take a look at it sometime. They are hilarious and really good for annoying you know, tough white boy gamers as you bring these things out. Okay, fleet all ahead, 93 megathrobs. Stop that. But like I said, this is a great way of getting your Starfleet Battles fleets back into play. All those models and so on work really well with this. The Star Wars miniatures that are out at the moment are really good, but the game that goes with them I think is execrable. I've played it a few times. I find it personally nigh unplayable. It's ridiculous. They work great with this. So yeah, if you've got miniatures from other sets and you're not playing those at the moment, consider getting hold of this. It's just one inexpensive rule book, and you can adapt it to bring all that stuff back into play again. So anyway, it's good seeing the new edition out. By the way, it's good to have the game still going strong, and it's going strong, as I said, because you can adapt it to do any damn full thing that you like. Love it. So we've enjoyed it. Yay! Fantastic. In fact, I'm going to go make some more ships for it. Woo! Have fun. Remember, the point of games is to have fun. And I hope I can meet everyone around the games table sometime. Cheers, everybody. Look after yourselves. Bye.